She hired a billionaire boyfriend for just $5, only to discover he was the boy she rejected in high school. What unfolds will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, drop a comment with your city to join the fun. At the end, rate this roller coaster romance from 0 to 10. Buckle up for Rachel and Ryan's unforgettable story. Rachel Bennett's golden curls bounced as she slumped into the worn leather booth of Brewed Awakening, the cafe's warm aroma of roasted coffee doing little to soothe her simmering irritation. Her phone glowed with the ostentatious wedding invitation from her sister Claire, who was set to marry a millionaire in a ceremony dripping with excess. The words, "Wear something elegant, Rachel," from her father's follow-up text stung like a paper cut. As if she'd show up in her barista apron, coffee stains and all. She tossed her phone onto the table, her blue eyes flashing with defiance. "I'm not going to Claire's smug little wedding alone," she declared to her best friend Lily, who was stirring an overpriced latte across from her. "I'll show them I'm not the family screw-up." Lily, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a skeptical smirk. "With what, Rachel? Your charm and a maxed-out credit card?" She gestured to Rachel's faded jeans and thrift store sweater. "You're a barista, not a socialite." Rachel's lips twitched into a mischievous grin. "I've got a plan." She dug into her worn canvas bag, pulling out a crumpled $5 bill, its edges frayed from too many trips through her wallet. "This," she said, slapping it on the table, "is my budget for a fake boyfriend. Someone to walk into that wedding and make Claire choke on her champagne." Lily nearly spat out her coffee, her laughter echoing through the cafe. $5? You'll be lucky to get a guy who doesn't show up in flip-flops. Escorts charge like $200 an hour. Undeterred, Rachel grabbed her phone and opened a classifieds app, her fingers flying over the screen. There's got to be someone desperate or crazy enough. She scrolled through listings, her face falling with each exorbitant rate. $250 for a dinner date? $500 for a weekend? This is robbery, she groaned, tossing her phone down in defeat. The $5 bill sat mockingly on the table, a symbol of her limited options. A smooth, amused voice cut through her frustration from the next booth. "I'll do it for $5. Rachel's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto a man leaning casually against the booth's edge, a steaming coffee cup in hand. Ryan Matthews was striking, tousled brown hair, green eyes that sparkled with mischief, and a tailored navy blazer that screamed money. His smile was disarming, confident, but not arrogant, and there was something unnervingly familiar about the way his gaze held hers, like a memory she couldn't quite grasp. "Excuse me?" Rachel asked, her tone laced with suspicion. "You're offering to be my fake boyfriend for $5. "Sounds like fun," Ryan said, his voice warm and teasing. He slid into the booth beside Lily without waiting for an invitation, setting his coffee down with a deliberate ease. "Saturday, right? A wedding? I can be charming, rich, and arm candy. Send me the details." Lily's eyes widened, darting between Rachel and the stranger. "Who are you? Some out-of-work actor? A con artist?" she asked, her tone half joking, half protective. Ryan chuckled, unfazed. "Just a guy who likes a challenge. Name's Ryan Matthews." He pushed the $5 bill back toward Rachel with a flick of his fingers. "Keep it. Coffee's on me." Rachel studied him, her instincts screaming caution. He was too polished, too perfect. His crisp white shirt, the subtle gleam of a designer watch peeking from his cuff. No one this good-looking took a $5 gig for kicks. Yet, there was something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition that tugged at the edges of her memory. Had she met him before? A high school party? A fleeting encounter? She shook it off, chalking it up to his generic handsomeness. "You're serious?" Rachel pressed, crossing her arms. "You'll show up to a fancy wedding, act like my doting boyfriend, and all you want is $5? $5 and the chance to see you pull this off, Ryan said, his grin widening. I'm great at looking expensive, trust me. Lily leaned forward, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. Rachel, this is either the start of a rom-com or a true crime documentary. Proceed with caution. Rachel ignored her mind racing. The wedding was in 3 days, and she had no other options. Claire's smug smile flashed in her mind, fueling her resolve. Fine, she said, locking eyes with Ryan. Saturday, 6 p.m., the Grand Evergreen Estate. Dress like you own the place. Don't make me regret this. Ryan stood, his movements fluid, like he'd rehearsed this moment. You won't. Text me the address. He tossed a wink her way, grabbed his coffee and strolled out of the cafe, leaving a trail of curious glances in his wake. Rachel and Lily sat in stunned silence, the $5 bill still lying between them like a dare. You just hired a stranger to be your boyfriend, Lily said, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. For $5. If he's not a serial killer, this might be the best story you ever tell. Rachel picked up the bill, smoothing it out with her fingers. He's too good to be true, she muttered, her mind replaying his face. That familiarity gnawed her, a puzzle piece she couldn't place. Why do I feel like I know him? Maybe he's a regular at the cafe, Lily suggested, but Rachel shook her head. It was deeper than that. A memory buried in the haze of her teenage years, fleeting and out of reach. As she walked home that evening, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement, Rachel's excitement mingled with unease. She'd taken a gamble, one that could either humiliate her sister or spectacularly backfire. Ryan Matthews was a wild card, a man who seemed to know more than he let on. His easy confidence, that spark in his eyes, it all felt like a setup for something bigger than a fake date. She clutched the $5 bill in her pocket, its weight heavier than it should have been. Saturday would reveal whether she'd struck gold or invited chaos into her life. Back at her cramped apartment, Rachel pulled out her phone and typed the wedding details to Ryan's number, hesitating before hitting send. She pictured Claire's face, the inevitable comparisons, the whispers of poor Rachel, still single. Her resolve hardened. Let's see you laugh when I walk in with him, she whispered, hitting send. The message whooshed away, sealing her fate. Somewhere across the city, Ryan Matthews glanced at his phone, a slow smile spreading across his face as Rachel's text lit up the screen. He leaned back in his sleek penthouse office, the city skyline glittering beyond the glass. The $5 bill she'd offered sat on his desk, a memento of a moment he'd never forgotten. Rachel Bennett had no idea who she'd just invited back into her life, but Ryan did. And this time, he wasn't the shy boy she'd dismissed all those years ago. This time, he was playing to win. The Grand Evergreen Estate shimmered under a late afternoon sun, its sprawling gardens and marble columns screaming wealth that Rachel Bennett could only dream of. She stood at the entrance, her borrowed sapphire gown clinging to her curves, the fabric a stark contrast to her usual coffee-stained aprons. Her blonde curls were pinned into an elegant updo, but her stomach churned with nerves. The $5 bill in her clutch felt like a talisman, a reminder of the gamble she'd taken with Ryan Matthews, the enigmatic stranger who'd agreed to be her fake boyfriend. His cryptic familiarity gnawed unrelentingly at her, but there was no time to dwell. Claire's wedding was a battlefield and Rachel was armed with a mysterious +1. A sleek black car pulled up, and Ryan stepped out, a vision in a tailored charcoal suit that fit like a second skin. His brown hair caught the golden light, and his green eyes sparkled with a playful confidence that made Rachel's breath hitch. Worth the $5? He asked, offering his arm with a grin that promised trouble. Maybe $5.50, Rachel quipped, her nerves easing as she slipped her arm through his. His cologne, subtle yet intoxicating, wrapped around her like a warm promise. You clean up nice. Almost too nice for a guy who takes coffee shop gigs. I aim to impress, Ryan replied, his voice low and teasing as they stepped into the venue. The grand hall was a spectacle of crystal chandeliers, towering floral arrangements, and guests dripping in designer labels. Rachel felt every eye on her, the weight of judgment heavier than her borrowed heels. But Ryan moved with effortless grace, nodding at waiters and shaking hands with strangers as if he owned the place. His presence was magnetic, and Rachel found herself relaxing, if only slightly, under his steady gaze. They navigated the crowd, Ryan's hand resting lightly on her lower back, a gesture that felt both protective and proprietary. At the open bar, Claire, resplendent in a white gown that screamed six figures, spotted them. Her smile was all teeth, sharp and calculating. "Rachel, you made it," she said, her tone syrupy with condescension. Her eyes flicked to Ryan, narrowing. "And who's this?" "Ryan Matthews, my boyfriend," Rachel said, forcing a smile as Ryan extended a hand. "Charmed," Ryan said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Rachel speaks so highly of you." Claire's eyebrow arched, clearly unconvinced. "What do you do, Ryan?" "I dabble in business," he replied, his vagueness deliberate. Rachel bit back a laugh, catching the flicker of frustration in Claire's eyes. Ryan's charm was a shield, deflecting her sister's, probing with ease. As Claire drifted off to greet other guests, Rachel leaned in. "Business? That's the best you've got?" "It worked, didn't it?" Ryan winked, handing her a glass of champagne. "Let's dance. Show them you belong here." The dance floor was a sea of swaying couples, and Ryan pulled her close, his hand firm on her waist. The music, a soft string quartet, wrapped around them as they moved. Rachel's nerves melted under his steady gaze, but that nagging sense of familiarity returned, sharper now. His smile, the way his eyes crinkled, it was like a half-remembered dream. "Do I know you from somewhere?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan's lips twitched, a secret dancing in his eyes. "Maybe I just have one of those faces." He spun her gently, pulling her back into his arms before she could press further. The moment felt electric, charged with something unspoken. Rachel's heart raced, not just from the dance, but from the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room. As the evening wore on, Ryan's charm worked its magic. He traded witty banter with Rachel's father, who grunted approval, and even won over her judgmental aunt with a story about a fictional vineyard he visited. Rachel watched, half amazed, half suspicious. No one was this good for $5. During a lull in the festivities, as they stood by a balcony overlooking the gardens, she turned to him. "You're too perfect at this. What's your deal, Ryan? Failed actor? Secret spy?" He chuckled, leaning against the railing, the moonlight casting shadows across his chiseled jaw. "Just a guy who likes a challenge. You wanted a show, I'm delivering." But Rachel wasn't convinced. His ease, his polish. It was too practiced, too precise. Before she could dig deeper, the music paused and the crowd gathered for the couple's first dance. Rachel and Ryan joined the onlookers. But as Claire twirled with her millionaire groom, Ryan leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "You don't remember me, do you? Westfield High, 2017. I asked you to prom and you said, 'In your dreams, nerd.'" Rachel froze, her champagne flute nearly slipping from her hand. The memory hit like a tidal wave. A gangly boy with oversized glasses, a nervous stammer, and a crumpled note he'd never given her. "You're that Ryan?" she whispered, her face flushing with shame. She'd laughed in his face, surrounded by her popular friends, dismissing him without a second thought. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I was awful." Ryan's smile was soft, almost wistful. "People change, Rachel. You hired me for $5. I'd say we're even." He clinked his glass against hers, but his eyes held a depth that unsettled her, a mix of amusement and something raw, unguarded. The rest of the night passed in a blur of toasts and small talk, but Rachel's mind was elsewhere. She stole glances at Ryan, trying to reconcile the awkward boy from her past with the confident man beside her. He caught her staring and raised an eyebrow, making her blush. "Stop looking at me like I'm a puzzle," he teased, guiding her back to the dance floor. As they swayed to a slow ballad, Rachel's guilt mingled with a growing curiosity. "Why did you take the $5 gig?" she asked, her voice soft. "You don't need the money." Ryan's expression flickered, a shadow crossing his face. "Maybe I wanted a second chance to make an impression." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Before she could respond, her father's voice boomed through a microphone, praising Claire's perfect match. While casting a pointed glance at Rachel, she bristled, but Ryan squeezed her hand. "Ignore him. You're stealing the show tonight." As the night ended, Ryan walked her to her car, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warmth of his presence. "You survived," he said, leaning against her beat-up sedan. "And you looked like you belonged." "Thanks to you," Rachel admitted, her heart doing an odd flip. "You were more than worth the $5, he grinned, but his eyes held that same cryptic depth. "Text me if you need an encore." With a mock salute, he walked away, leaving Rachel staring after him, her mind a whirlwind of guilt, attraction, and unanswered questions. She clutched the $5 bill in her purse, its weight a reminder of the gamble that had just changed everything. Tomorrow, she'd face Claire's smugness and her regrets. But tonight, Ryan Matthews had rewritten the rules of her story, and she wasn't sure what came next. Rachel Bennett's borrowed sapphire gown still hung in her closet, a vivid reminder of the electric night at Claire's wedding, where Ryan Matthews had upended her world with his revelation. The memory of his prom rejection confession lingered like a bruise, tender and unresolved. But his parting words, "Text me if you need an encore," echoed with a promise she couldn't ignore. 3 days later, her phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. "Gala at the Meridian Hotel Saturday. Be my date. I'll cover everything." Rachel stared at the text, her heart caught between curiosity and caution. The $5 deal had already spiraled into something bigger. Could she handle diving deeper into his world? Saturday evening, Rachel stood before a full-length mirror in a shimmering silver dress, its sleek lines hugging her frame like a second skin. The gown, delivered to her apartment with a note from Ryan, "You'll outshine them all," felt like a costume for a role she wasn't sure she could play. Her blonde curls cascaded over one shoulder, and the borrowed heels pinched her toes. But the reflection staring back was undeniable. She looked like she belonged. Lily, sprawled on Rachel's bed, whistled. "You're giving Cinderella a run for her money. But seriously, are you sure about this guy? He's too smooth." "He's a mystery," Rachel admitted, adjusting her earrings. "But he's also real. I owe him a chance." The truth was, Ryan's easy charm and that fleeting vulnerability on the balcony had hooked her. She wanted to know more, even if it scared her. The Meridian Hotel's ballroom was a glittering fortress of wealth, its chandeliers casting prisms across polished marble floors. Ryan waited at the entrance, his black tuxedo accentuating his broad shoulders and sharp jawline. His green eyes lit up when he saw her. "You look breathtaking," he said, offering his arm. "Ready to face the wolves?" "Wolves?" Rachel raised an eyebrow, her pulse quickening as they stepped into the crowd. The room buzzed with power, CEOs, investors, and socialites sipping champagne, their smiles as calculated as their outfits. Ryan's hand rested lightly on her back, a steady anchor in the sea of scrutiny. "Just be you," he whispered. "That's more than enough." Rachel tried to relax. Mimicking Ryan's effortless charm, as he introduced her to a blur of names and titles. She nodded at their small talk, but the weight of their gazes, appraising, skeptical, made her feel like an imposter. Then, a voice sliced through the hum of conversation, sharp and cold. "Ryan's new arm candy?" Victoria Langley stood before them. Her brunette hair swept into a flawless chignon, her crimson gown screaming old money. Her smile was a blade, and her hazel eyes locked onto Rachel with predatory intent. Ryan's grip on Rachel's arm tightened, his voice cool. "Victoria, always a pleasure." "Charming as ever," Victoria purred, her gaze sliding to Rachel. "And you are?" "Rachel Bennett," she replied, meeting Victoria's stare head-on. "Ryan's date." The word boyfriend stuck in her throat. Too real, too soon after the wedding's revelations. Victoria's lips curled. How quaint. Ryan does love his little projects. The barb stung, but Rachel forced a smile, refusing to flinch. Ryan steered her away, but Victoria's presence lingered like a storm cloud. At a cocktail table, Rachel found herself surrounded by a group of investors, their conversation a maze of jargon about markets and mergers. Ryan nudged her. "Tell them about your cafe days," she laughed, launching into a story about a customer who demanded a latte with exactly 7 espresso shots. Her humor, raw and unpolished, drew chuckles from the group. "She's refreshing," one investor said, raising his glass. "Not like the usual stiffs here." Rachel's confidence grew, but Victoria reappeared, her smile sharper now. "Rachel, you must join me for brunch tomorrow. I'd love to get to know Ryan's latest interest." Her tone dripped with condescension, but Rachel sensed a challenge beneath the invitation. "Sure," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Name the place." Victoria's eyes narrowed, as if she hadn't expected Rachel to accept. "Le Jardin, 10 a.m., she said, then glided away, leaving a chill in her wake. As the gala continued, Ryan and Rachel moved to the dance floor, his hand warm on her waist. "You didn't have to say yes to her," he murmured, his breath brushing her ear. "Victoria's trouble." "I can handle trouble," Rachel replied, though her heart raced, not just from the dance, but from the intensity in his gaze. "Besides, she's got a vendetta. I want to know why." Ryan's expression darkened, a flicker of something unspoken passing over his face. "Just be careful. She plays dirty." His warning hung heavy, but the music pulled them closer, their bodies swaying in sync. For a moment, the room faded, and it was just them, Rachel's insecurities melting under the warmth of his touch. The night ended with a toast to a new corporate deal, and Ryan's speech, confident, commanding, drew applause. Rachel watched, torn between admiration and unease. He was a natural in this world, but was she? As they left the hotel, the city lights glittering beyond the glass doors, Ryan squeezed her hand. "You were incredible tonight," he said. "They loved you." "They loved the idea of me," Rachel corrected, her voice soft. "The girl who doesn't belong but makes them laugh." She glanced at him, searching his eyes. "Why did you invite me here, Ryan? Really?" He hesitated, his smile faltering. "Because you make this world feel real, not just a game of power and pretense." His words hit her like a spark, igniting something she wasn't ready to name. But Victoria's invitation loomed as a shadow over the night's warmth. As Ryan drove her home, the silence between them was charged, filled with unspoken questions. Rachel clutched her purse, the $5 bill still inside, a reminder of the gamble that had led her here. Tomorrow's brunch with Victoria was a gauntlet, a test of her place in Ryan's glittering, treacherous world. She stole a glance at him, his profile sharp against the city lights. He was no longer just the boy she'd rejected. He was a mystery, a risk, and a pull she couldn't resist. As she stepped out of his car, The cool night air stung her skin, but her resolve burned hotter. Victoria wanted a fight, and Rachel was ready to show her she wasn't just a plus one. She was a force. Rachel Bennett stepped out of the taxi, her heart pounding as she faced Le Jardin's sleek glass facade. The memory of Victoria Langley's venomous smile at the gala clung to her like a shadow, and the invitation to brunch felt like a summons to a duel. The $5 deal with Ryan Matthews had spiraled into a high-stakes game, and today, Rachel was walking into the lion's den, armed with nothing but her wit and a borrowed cream-colored dress that hugged her curves. Her blonde curls bounced with each determined step, but her stomach twisted with unease. Victoria's challenge wasn't just about brunch. It was about proving Rachel didn't belong in Ryan's world. Inside, Le Jardin was a minimalist shrine to wealth, its white marble tables and delicate china screaming exclusivity. Victoria sat at a corner table, flanked by three women who looked like they'd been sculpted from the same mold, blonde, rail-thin, with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Rachel recognized the setup, a firing squad disguised as a social gathering. Victoria's crimson lips curved as she waved Rachel over. "Rachel, darling, you made it. Meet Madison, Sophia, and Jennifer, friends who share my refined tastes." Rachel slid into the seat, her posture straight despite the predatory gazes. "Nice to meet you," she said, her voice steady. "I'm Rachel, the ex-barista who hired Ryan for $5. The bluntness caught them off guard, and Madison's perfectly manicured eyebrow twitched. Rachel leaned back, her smile genuine but sharp. She'd learned from the gala. Authenticity was her weapon, and she wasn't here to play their game. Victoria sipped her mimosa, her eyes glinting with malice. "So, Rachel, tell us about this arrangement with Ryan. It's quite the story, hiring a billionaire for pocket change." Her tone dripped with condescension, and Sophia stifled a laugh. Jennifer leaned forward, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "How does one even find a man like Ryan in a coffee shop?" Rachel took a slow bite of her croissant, savoring their discomfort. "I was ranting about needing a fake boyfriend for my sister's wedding, and Ryan overheard. He thought it sounded fun. Best $5 I ever spent." She flashed a grin, watching Victoria's smile tighten. "He's great at playing the part, charming, handsome, and doesn't take himself too seriously, unlike some people." Madison coughed, hiding a smirk, but Victoria's composure held, though her knuckles whitened around her glass. "How charmingly unconventional," she said. "But Ryan's world requires a certain sophistication. Don't you find it hard to keep up?" Rachel's laugh was light but cutting. "Sophistication? You mean knowing which fork to use for salad? I'm more about being real. Ryan seems to like that." She leaned forward, her blue eyes locked on Victoria's. "But you'd know all about trying to keep up, wouldn't you? I heard things didn't end so well between you two." The table went still. Sophia's fork paused midair, and Jennifer's eyes widened. Victoria's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, her voice icy. "Careful, Rachel. You're treading on dangerous ground." "Oh, I'm not scared," Rachel said, her voice calm but unyielding. "Ryan mentioned something about you leaking his company's secrets to a competitor. That's why you're his ex, right?" The lie slipped out effortlessly, a gamble based on Ryan's warning about Victoria playing dirty. Rachel's heart raced, but she held her ground, watching Victoria's face drain of color. "He told you that?" Victoria hissed, her composure cracking like thin ice. The other women exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. Rachel seized the moment, her voice steady. "He didn't have to. Trust reveals a lot. Like how you thought you could intimidate me today." She gestured to the group. "What was the plan? Parade me in front of your friends to prove I'm not good enough? Sorry, but I'm not here to audition for your approval." Madison's lips twitched, and Sophia's eyes darted to Victoria, who was visibly rattled. "You're out of your depth, Rachel," Victoria said, her voice low and venomous. "Ryan will tire of you, just like he did with me." Rachel stood, smoothing her dress with deliberate calm. "If he tired of you, maybe it's because you were more interested in his bank account than his heart. Me? I paid him $5 to be himself. That's the difference." She picked up her purse, her smile radiant, but razor sharp. "Thanks for the brunch, Victoria. Next time you plan an ambush, pick an easier target." The silence was deafening as Rachel walked out, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Outside, the morning sun warmed her skin, and she exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands trembled, but triumph surged through her veins. She'd faced Victoria's clique and come out unscathed, her authenticity a shield they couldn't pierce. But the victory felt fleeting. Ryan's world was a maze of power plays, and she'd just painted a target on her back. As she hailed a taxi, her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "How'd it go? Survive, Victoria?" Rachel smirked, typing back, "Crushed it. She's not as tough as she thinks." But as the taxi pulled away, doubt crept in. Victoria's fury was palpable, and Rachel knew this wasn't the end. The $5 deal had thrust her into a world of glittering facades and hidden knives, and Ryan's past with Victoria was a storm waiting to break. She glanced at the crumpled bill in her purse, its edges worn but defiant. She'd won this round, but the next would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Tomorrow she'd face the fallout, and Ryan's reaction to her boldness might just redefine their fragile connection. Rachel Bennett's triumph at Le Jardin still buzzed in her veins as she stepped into her cramped apartment, the crumpled $5 bill in her purse, a quiet testament to her victory over Victoria Langley's ambush. The brunch had been a battle, and Rachel had emerged unscathed, her sharp wit cutting through Victoria's polished veneer. But as she kicked off her borrowed heels, a nagging unease settled in her chest. Ryan Matthews' world was a glittering minefield, and her bold stand against his ex-fiancée had likely stirred a hornet's nest. Her phone glowed with Ryan's text. "Crushed it. She's not as tough as she thinks." And his playful tone warmed her, but the weight of his past and her place in his life pressed harder. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. This was real, and the stakes were climbing. The next morning, Rachel arrived at Brood Awakening for her barista shift, her blonde curls tucked under a worn cap. The cafe's familiar hum grounded her, a stark contrast to the opulence of Ryan's gala and Victoria's brunch. She was steaming milk when her boss, Mr. Carver, stormed over, his face red and a tabloid clutched in his hand. The headline screamed, "Barista bags billionaire! Rachel Bennett's Cinderella story." A grainy photo showed her and Ryan dancing at the gala, his arm around her waist, her smile radiant. Rachel's stomach dropped. "Explain this," Carver barked, slamming the paper on the counter. Customers glanced over, their whispers a low buzz. "You're making us look like a circus." "It's just a photo," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the heat creeping up her neck. "I went to an event. It's not a crime." "It's bad for business," Carver snapped. "Customers think you're some gold digger using my cafe to climb the social ladder. You're fired." Rachel's jaw tightened, her hands balling into fists. "Fired? For going to a gala? That's ridiculous." "Pack your things," Carver said, turning away. "You're done." She stood frozen, the sting of humiliation burning hotter than the espresso machine. The tabloid's words mocked her. Cinderella story. As if her life were a fairy tale instead of a mess. She grabbed her apron and stormed out, the $5 in her pocket feeling heavier than ever. Ryan's fame had cost her job, her stability, and her normalcy. Fury propelled her across the city to the gleaming glass tower of Matthews Enterprises, where Ryan's empire loomed like a fortress. She marched past the receptionist, ignoring her protests, and took the elevator to the top floor, her heart pounding with righteous anger. Ryan's office was a cathedral of wealth, floor-to-ceiling windows, framing a city that bowed to him, a mahogany desk the size of her kitchen. He looked up from a stack of papers, his green eyes widening. "Rachel, what's wrong?" "You happened," she shouted, slamming the tabloid on his desk. "This photo got me fired. My boss thinks I'm a gold digger because of you." Ryan's face fell, guilt flickering in his eyes. He stood, rounding the desk. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think—" "Of course you didn't," Rachel cut in, her voice shaking. "You live in this shiny bubble where photos don't ruin lives. I'm a barista, Ryan. Or I was. This is my reality, not some game." He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. "Let me fix this. I'll call your boss. Get your job back." "No," Rachel snapped. "I'm not crawling back to a man who thinks I'm a liability. But you need to understand, this isn't fun for me anymore. Your world is a minefield and I'm the one getting blown up." Ryan's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "Then let me help. Join me at another event tonight. I'll cover your expenses, rent, bills, everything. No strings, just you by my side." Rachel hesitated, her pride warring with desperation. Her bank account was a ticking time bomb, and the gala's allure tugged at her. "One event," she said finally. "But no more surprises." That evening, the Meridian Hotel shone with even greater grandeur than before, its ballroom filled with power brokers and their glittering entourages. Rachel wore a deep emerald gown, its elegance a stark contrast to her churning emotions. Ryan, in a tailored black suit, guided her through the crowd, his hand a steady anchor. "You're doing great," he whispered as they mingled, his smile both reassuring and disarming. Rachel forced a laugh, charming a tech mogul with a story about a cafe customer who paid with Monopoly money. The room ate it up, but her heart wasn't in it. The tabloid's headline haunted her, a reminder that she was an outsider in this world of wealth and pretense. As they sipped champagne, Ryan leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "You make this place feel real, Rachel. Not just a stage." His words hit her like a spark, igniting a warmth she wasn't ready to acknowledge. She wanted to believe him, but the sting of her firing lingered, a wound that wouldn't close. "I don't belong here," she murmured, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I'm just the girl who paid you $5. "You're more than that," Ryan said, his voice low and intense. "You're the only one here who sees me, not the CEO." His hand brushed hers, and for a moment, the room faded, leaving just the two of them. Rachel's heart raced, torn between the pull of his words and the fear of his world's scrutiny. The moment was shattered when a photographer snapped their picture, the flash blinding. Rachel flinched, the tabloid's headline flashing in her mind. "They're watching us," she whispered, her voice tight. Ryan's jaw clenched, but he squeezed her hand. "Let them watch. You're with me." As they danced, Rachel felt the weight of every stare, every whisper. She was a spectacle, a story for their gossip columns. Yet Ryan's touch grounded her, his eyes promising something she couldn't yet name. When the night ended, he drove her home, the city lights blurring past. "You were incredible," he said, his voice soft. "I meant what I said. You make this world real." Rachel looked at him, her heart a tangle of hope and fear. "Your world costs too much, Ryan. I lost my job today. What's next?" He didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. As she stepped out of his car, the $5 bill in her purse felt like a chain, tying her to a man whose life could unravel hers. Tomorrow, she'd face the fallout of her newfound fame. But tonight, Ryan's words echoed in her mind. a dangerous lure pulling her deeper into his orbit. The next chapter awaited, and Rachel knew it would test her in ways she couldn't yet fathom. Rachel Bennett's emerald gown hung in her closet, a relic of the gala where Ryan Matthews' world had both dazzled and wounded her. The sting of her firing still burned. The tabloid headline, "Barista Bags Billionaire," a cruel reminder of how his fame had upended her life. His offer to cover her expenses had been a lifeline, but his words, "You make this world real," echoed in her mind, a tether pulling her toward him despite her fears. The $5 bill in her purse, now a symbol of their tangled bond, felt heavier each day. When Ryan stopped texting after the gala, his silence was deafening, leaving Rachel adrift in a sea of doubt. Had she pushed him away with her anger, or was he retreating into the polished fortress of his life? Determined to find answers, Rachel called his office, only to be met with the receptionist's curt response. "Mr. Matthews is unavailable." 5 calls over 3 days yielded the same stone wall. Frustration gnawed at her as she confided in Lily over cheap wine in her cramped apartment. "He's vanished," Rachel said, her blonde curls falling messily around her face. "One minute he's begging me to be his date, the next he's a ghost." Lily swirled her glass, her eyes narrowing. "Billionaires don't just disappear. Something's up. You need to track him down." Rachel's new job at a 24-hour convenience store offered little distraction. The fluorescent lights and endless shelves of candy couldn't quiet her racing thoughts. During a slow shift, her co-worker Ethan, a lanky guy with a quick laugh, offered a lead. "My sister works at Portland General's VIP wing. She mentioned a Matthews on the visitor list. Someone's in the hospital." Rachel's heart skipped. "Which hospital? Which Matthews?" "Portland General, VIP wing," Ethan said, tossing her a soda. "That's all I got. Go be your detective self." The next morning, Rachel stood outside Portland General's imposing glass entrance, her stomach knotted with nerves. She had no plan, only a burning need to know why Ryan had vanished. At the reception desk, she took a gamble. "I'm here to see Mrs. Matthews," she said, hoping Ryan's mother was the patient. The receptionist's skeptical glance made her improvise. "I'm her daughter-in-law." "Room 412, the receptionist said, waving her through. "But she's resting, family only." Rachel's pulse raced as she rode the elevator, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Room 412's door loomed, its small window revealing a dimly lit scene. A middle-aged woman lay in bed, connected to monitors, her face pale but serene. Beside her, slumped in a plastic chair, was Ryan. His tailored suits were gone, replaced by a wrinkled hoodie and jeans. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and stubble dusted his jaw. He looked nothing like the confident CEO she knew. He looked broken. Rachel knocked softly and slipped inside. Ryan jolted awake, his green eyes wide with shock. "Rachel, how did you—" "Amateur detective work," she said, her voice softer than she intended. She glanced at the woman in the bed. "Your mom?" Ryan nodded, his shoulders sagging. "Eleanor. She had a stroke last week. It's been rough." "Why didn't you tell me?" Rachel asked, her anger from the gala dissolving into concern. She pulled a chair beside him, the hospital's sterile hum filling the silence. "We weren't exactly talking," Ryan said, his voice raw. "You were mad about the tabloid, your job. I didn't want to burden you." Rachel's heart ached. "Burden me? Ryan, I could have been here." She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his. "You don't have to do this alone." He looked at her, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. "You'd have come." "Of course, you idiot," she said, a small smile breaking through. "I'm not heartless." They sat in silence, watching Eleanor's steady breathing. Her face, lined with quiet strength, reminded Rachel of Ryan's warmth beneath his polished exterior. "She's beautiful," Rachel said softly. "She'd love you," Ryan replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "She always said I needed someone who didn't care about my money." Rachel's throat tightened. The $5 deal had started as a lark, but it had led her here, to this raw, unguarded moment. "Ryan, about the gala, I was scared. Your world, it's too much. The headlines, the judgment. I lost my job because of a photo." "I know," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I never meant for that to happen. I wanted you to see my world, to be part of it." "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm nobody, a barista who laughed at you in high school." Ryan's gaze locked onto hers, intense and unguarded. "Because you're the only one who sees me, not the billionaire. But I'm still that nerd from Westfield High, Rachel. Your rejection, it broke me. I spent years building this armor, becoming someone no one could laugh at. But with you..." He paused, his voice cracking. "I'm terrified you'll see the real me and run again." Rachel's eyes stung with tears. She remembered the boy with oversized glasses, his nervous stammer as he asked her to prom. She'd been cruel, caught up in her teenage vanity. "I'm not that girl anymore," she said, squeezing his hand. "I was an idiot back then. But you're not that boy either. You're... you." He laughed, a soft, broken sound. "I'm both. The CEO and the kid who practiced asking you out in front of a mirror. I pulled away at the gala because I was scared. If I let you in, really in, and you leave..." He shook his head. "I don't know if I can handle that." Rachel's heart pounded. She leaned closer, her voice steady despite the tears. "I'm scared too, Ryan. Scared I don't belong in your world. But I'm here, aren't I?" She cupped his face, her thumb brushing his stubble. "I'm not running." His eyes searched hers, raw and vulnerable. Then, as if a dam broke, he pulled her close, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was desperate, honest, and electric. It wasn't the polished charm of the gala or the playful tease of the wedding. It was real, a confession of everything they'd both been hiding. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too," Rachel said, her voice trembling with the weight of it. They held each other, the hospital's hum fading into the background, their connection a quiet anchor in the storm. As they pulled apart, Eleanor stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She smiled faintly, her voice weak but warm. "You must be Rachel. My son hasn't stopped talking about you." Ryan blushed, and Rachel laughed, the tension breaking. "All good things, I hope," she said, squeezing his hand. The moment felt fragile, precious. But Rachel knew the world outside this room wouldn't wait. Victoria's shadow loomed, and the tabloids' fallout was far from over. The $5 in her purse had started this journey. But love was pulling her deeper into Ryan's life. A life of risks she wasn't sure she could face. As she sat beside him, watching Eleanor drift back to sleep, Rachel braced for the next chapter, knowing it would test their newfound bond in ways neither could predict. The hospital room's sterile hum lingered in Rachel Bennett's memory as she returned to her routine, the kiss with Ryan Matthews still burning on her lips. Their confession of love, raw and unguarded beside his mother Eleanor's bedside, had shifted something fundamental, like a fault line cracking open. The $5 bill in her purse, once a playful token, now felt like a contract binding her to a man whose world both thrilled and terrified her. Ryan's vulnerability, his admission of being the nerdy boy she'd rejected, had stripped away her defenses. Still, the tabloids' fallout and her lost job at Brood Awakening cast a long shadow. As she stocked shelves at her new convenience store job, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, Rachel wrestled with a question. Could she truly belong in Ryan's glittering, judgmental universe? Ryan's texts came daily, each one a mix of warmth and persistence. "Dinner tonight? Miss you. Mom asked about you." Rachel replied sparingly, her heart torn between the pull of his love and the fear of his world's scrutiny. The memory of the tabloid headline, "Barista bags billionaire," stung like a fresh wound, a reminder of how quickly her life could unravel. She wanted him, but the cost of his fame felt like a noose tightening around her freedom. On a quiet Wednesday evening, as Rachel rang up a customer's energy drinks, Ryan's office called. "Mr. Matthews has an opening at Matthews Enterprises," the assistant said briskly. "Public relations, perfect for your charisma. He'd like you to consider it." Rachel's grip tightened on the phone. A job at his company? The idea was tempting. Stability, a paycheck that didn't involve counting change, but it reeked of charity. "Tell him I'll think about it," she said, hanging up before she could waver. The offer felt like another step into his world, one she wasn't sure she could navigate without losing herself. That night, Ryan appeared at the store, his tailored coat out of place among the racks of chips and soda. His green eyes, usually so confident, held a restless intensity. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cutting through the hum of the cooler. "I'm working," Rachel replied, scanning a pack of gum for a customer. Her heart raced, sensing the storm brewing in his gaze. "Rachel, this can't wait." He stepped closer, his presence filling the small space. "I want you in my life, really in it. The job, the gala, us going public. I'm all in, but you keep pulling back." Her chest tightened. She waved off the next customer and faced him, her hands on her hips. "I'm not pulling back, Ryan. I'm trying to survive. Your world cost me my job, my privacy. Now you want me to work for you, be your public girlfriend? That's not love, it's a takeover." Ryan's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed calm. "I'm not trying to control you. I'm offering you a way out of this." He gestured to the store, the flickering lights. "You're better than this, Rachel. You charmed a room full of CEOs. You took down Victoria. You belong with me, not hiding behind a counter." "Hiding?" Rachel's voice rose, drawing Ethan's curious glance from the back. "This is my life, Ryan. I'm not ashamed of it. But your world, photographers, gossip, judgment, it's suffocating. People will say I'm with you for your money." "Let them," Ryan said, his voice fierce. "I don't care what they think. I care about you. But you're running from us, from what we could be." "I'm not running," she snapped, though her voice wavered. "I'm scared. Scared I'll never be enough for your world. Scared I'll embarrass you. Scared you'll wake up and want someone who fits." Ryan stepped closer, his eyes burning with frustration and something deeper, pain. "You think I want someone else? Rachel, I love you. Your laugh, your honesty, the way you make me feel like a regular guy. But I can't keep chasing you while you push me away. You need to decide. Be my girlfriend for real, no excuses, or let me go." The words hit like a punch, stealing her breath. The store's hum faded, leaving only the weight of his ultimatum. Rachel's eyes stung, memories of their hospital kiss clashing with her fear of his spotlight. "That's not fair," she whispered. "You're asking me to risk everything." "And you're asking me to hide my feelings," Ryan countered, his voice softer but unyielding. "I'm not that kid you rejected anymore. I'm done hiding. Be with me, Rachel, or we're done." Her heart screamed to say yes, but fear clamped her throat shut. She saw the tabloid's headline, the whispers at the gala, her boss's sneer. "I need time," she said finally, her voice breaking. Ryan's shoulders slumped, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "I can't keep waiting for you to choose me." He turned and walked out, the bell above the door jangling like a final note. Rachel stood frozen, her hands trembling as she gripped the counter. Ethan approached, his voice cautious. You okay? No, she admitted, tears spilling over. She'd pushed Ryan away, but the emptiness he left was unbearable. The $5 bill in her pocket felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of the love she might have just lost. The next few days were a blur of shifts and sleepless nights. Rachel ignored Ryan's calls, each voicemail a plea she couldn't face. Rachel, I'm sorry I pushed. Just talk to me. I miss you. Please. She listened in the dark, her heart aching, but fear held her back. Lily, over coffee, was blunt. You're not scared of his world, Rachel. You're scared of loving him. You'll lose him if you don't act. Rachel knew she was right. Ryan's ultimatum had forced her to confront her own walls, built from years of feeling less than her perfect sister, less than the polished women in his orbit. But his love, raw, real, unguarded, had cracked those walls. She had to choose, run from fear or fight for him. As her shift ended Friday night, Rachel stepped outside, the city's chill biting her skin. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over Ryan's number. The $5 bill in her pocket was a reminder of the gamble that had started this. But love was the real risk now. She wasn't ready to lose him. Tomorrow, she'd find him, face her fears, and rewrite their story, together or not at all. Rachel Bennett's heart still raced from Ryan Matthews' public proposal. The image of him on one knee with a sign declaring, Rachel Bennett, marry me for more than $5, seared into her memory. His ultimatum at the convenience store had forced her to confront her fears, and her tearful yes on the sidewalk, amidst cheering neighbors, had been a leap into a future she'd never dared imagine. The $5 bill, now a cherished relic of their improbable love, sat in her purse as she woke on her wedding day, 5 months later, in a small apartment, bathed in morning light. But a strange nausea twisted her stomach, more than just nerves, and it carried a secret that could upend everything. The mirror reflected a radiant bride-to-be, her blonde curls pinned elegantly, her simple ivory gown accentuating her curves with understated grace. Yet, as she adjusted her veil, the queasiness intensified, a quiet alarm beneath her excitement. Lily burst into the room, a whirlwind of energy with Rachel's bouquet in hand. My favorite bride, she exclaimed, her dark hair bouncing. Ready to marry your billionaire? Rachel forced a smile, pressing a hand to her stomach. I feel off, nauseous, probably just nerves, right? Lily's eyes narrowed, but she waved it off. Normal. I'd be sick too, marrying a guy that gorgeous. She handed Rachel the bouquet, her grin infectious. Let's get you to the church. At the cozy kitchen table, Eleanor, Ryan's mother, insisted on serving breakfast. Her recovery from the stroke, a quiet miracle. You need to eat, sweetheart, she said, setting down a plate of pancakes. Her sharp eyes studied Rachel, catching the way she pushed the food around. Everything okay? Rachel nodded, but the nausea surged, forcing her to excuse herself. In the bathroom, she splashed water on her face, the mirror reflecting her growing suspicion. Eleanor's question at breakfast, when was your last, had planted a seed. Rachel's mind raced, counting days on an imaginary calendar. Her period was late, very late. Oh no, she whispered, her heart pounding. Rachel, we're on a schedule, Lily called through the door. But Rachel was already grabbing her purse, the $5 bill brushing her fingers as she pulled out her keys. I need to run to the pharmacy, she said, bursting out. Now! Lily and Eleanor exchanged bewildered glances, but followed her to the corner drugstore. A pregnancy test? Lily gasped, spotting the box in Rachel's hand. On your wedding day? I'm not just nervous, Rachel said, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. I need to know. Back at the apartment, the bathroom felt like a confessional as Rachel waited, the test stick trembling in her hand. Lily and Eleanor stood outside, their anxious whispers barely audible. 3 minutes stretched into eternity, each second a pulse of anticipation. Then, 2 pink lines appeared, stark and undeniable. Rachel's breath caught. "Oh my God," she whispered, opening the door to face her wide-eyed audience. "I'm pregnant," Lily squealed, throwing her arms around Rachel. "I'm gonna be an aunt." Eleanor's eyes glistened, her voice soft. "I'm going to be a grandma." Rachel, still clutching the test, felt panic and joy collide. "I'm going to be a mom," she said, her voice breaking, "on my wedding day. How do I tell Ryan?" "Breathe," Eleanor said, her teacher's calm steadying the room. "Get to the church, get married, then tell him when the moment's right." The small church, adorned with lilies and soft candlelight, hummed with anticipation as Rachel walked down the aisle, her ivory gown glowing against the wooden pews. Ryan stood at the altar, his tuxedo accentuating his broad shoulders, his green eyes locking onto her with a love that made her knees weak. "You look beautiful," he whispered as she reached him, his voice thick with emotion. Rachel's heart pounded, the secret of her pregnancy burning on her tongue. "Ryan, I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the organ's soft notes. "Now?" he asked, a playful smile tugging at his lips. But the minister began, his voice solemn, and Rachel's words caught in her throat. The ceremony unfolded in a blur of vows and rings, each moment pulling her closer to the truth. As the minister intoned, "If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined," Rachel seized the pause, her heart racing. "Ryan," she whispered urgently, leaning close. "I'm pregnant." Ryan froze, his eyes widening as he processed the words. He blinked once, twice. Then a grin broke across his face, bright as the sun. "What?" he whispered, his voice a mix of shock and joy. "Pregnant," Rachel repeated, her voice trembling. "Baby 9 months diapers." Probably from that night after the restaurant, when Victoria interrupted. Ryan's laugh was soft, disbelieving. The minister cleared his throat. "Is everything all right?" Ryan turned to the congregation, his voice ringing with unrestrained joy. "She's pregnant," he announced, lifting Rachel's hand like a trophy. The church went silent, then erupted in cheers. Eleanor stood, clapping wildly, her shout of, "I'm going to be a grandma," sparking laughter. Lily wiped tears, snapping photos from the front row. Rachel covered her face, embarrassment and joy colliding. "Ryan, you didn't have to tell everyone," she laughed. But he pulled her close, his eyes shining. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low, meant only for her. "3 tests, all positive," she said, her smile matching his. "We're having a baby." Ryan lifted her off her feet, spinning her gently as the congregation cheered louder. "Minister, speed this up," he called, grinning. "I need to kiss my pregnant wife." The ceremony blurred into a joyful chaos of vows, laughter, and tears. When the minister finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Ryan's kiss was fierce, tender, a promise of forever. "I love you, Mrs. Matthews," he whispered. "I love you too, Mr. Matthews," Rachel replied, her hand resting on her stomach. "And so does our baby." Weeks later, in their new home, Rachel found a framed $5 bill on Ryan's office wall, its edges worn but proud. "You kept it?" she asked, turning to him. Ryan wrapped his arms around her, his hand resting on her still flat belly. "Best investment of my life. It gave me you, and now our family." Rachel laughed, her heart full, the $5 deal a spark that had ignited a love stronger than any spotlight. As they kissed, the future stretched before them, messy, beautiful, and theirs. What did you think of Rachel and Ryan's whirlwind journey from a $5 deal to a lifetime of love? Drop your thoughts and rate this heartwarming tale from 0 to 10 in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us on this emotional ride, and we can't wait to share more stories with you soon. Until next time.